Hello. Okay. Welcome to the Post-Work podcast recorded at Calmark Studios Bunkers, somewhere hidden in Berlin. I'm Pablo Denegri, your host, and today's guest is Canadian fermentation expert, bacteria barista, inner and outer multiculturalist, Alexis Goertz. Alexis, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for your invite.
We met, I heard a talk from you 3 years ago or so, and you were telling about how you got into this bacteria animal collection. I stepped in the middle of it, so I still don't know the first part of it. And maybe we can start on how your bacteria journey started.
It started a really long time ago. If I look back at where I really started, but where I consciously started was probably my year in Mozambique when I lived in
Right.
Africa.
You did the social work there, right?
Yes, yeah. So I was there. Basically, my job description was to widen the horizons of a very rural community that I was living in. And of course, my horizons were widened, I would say even more so. And because I was thrown into a community, there was no fridges, there was no electricity
Right.
while I was there, and thus there was no fridges. In order to preserve our food, we had to do things with it, which was often fermenting it. And
That's why you learn, actually.
and that's where I discovered fermentation consciously for the first time.
Hey.
Yeah, and we had this fermented corn in water called maheo. And I recognized, okay, on the first day, it's just corn, flour, and water. And on the third day, it's something sparkling. And on the fifth day, it's really amazing. And on the eighth day, it's alcoholic.
Right.
And so I really liked, like, between the third and the fifth day, that was my favorite time of having this sort of sludgy porridge, fermented porridge drink. And I recognized that it didn't only grow on me or in me.
Right, literally.
Literally, I was really enjoying this maheo. The first time I had it, I said, "Oh, what is this weird sludgy sparkling drink?" But after a while, I was craving it, and whenever I heard maheo, I was like, "Oh, I need that drink." I'm so looking forward.
Right.
And started to be more aware that to me that fermentation was the reason for this taste. It was the same two ingredients that were at the start and the same two ingredients that were in the end, but there was a transformation that happened, which was for me really intriguing. What's happening between day 1 and day 5 and day
Right.
1 and day 8?
Were you
So-
before interested in chemistry or gastronomy or before this experience?
To be honest, no. I was in the art world, and I was there actually doing my thesis as how art transforms rural communities. And I was always interested in biology, so into plants and animals and how things function, and more of a subconscious, understanding of a subconscious love of biology. I did take
Okay.
biology. I did take chemistry.
Yeah.
I wish I took physics
Right.
now.
Yeah.
But I think it started to become this real desire to understand more of what is going on in the microbial world and like the sort of the unseen atmosphere of things.
So you didn't study where you said you had biology in high school?
In
or-
high school,
Right.
and then I went to university and studied international development,
Yeah.
which is a bit more political.
Yeah.
But my goal at that age, at 17, was to get out of where I was living
Explore the
and
world.
explore the world.
Of course.
And I thought, international sounds great.
Yeah.
Cultures, right?
Of course.
Cultures, to get to new cultures was my goal. And through the back door or through a new door, which I guess I didn't expect, is where I met all of these other cultures, like all of these strange bacterial cultures.
Right, that's interesting because they're called cultures. And what I said at the beginning is because I read somewhere that you make a word game also with this, that you were first external multicultural, but after you discover fermentation, at least consciously, also internal multicultural. Uh,
Exactly.
there's a lot
Exactly.
of parallelisms there in which also these microbial cultures affects our cultures the same or more maybe as art.
Totally. I mean, if we look at, say, sort of the outer sphere, we have various cultures, right? We have the German culture or a Korean culture that uses cultures to create a new culture. So, like a
Right.
yogurt culture, right? It's a milk, it's a bacterial and sometimes yeast composition that will culture milk from, say, Sweden, which is it has its own culture. And by eating that yogurt culture, you are culturing your inside and becoming this
Right.
multiculturalist in a way, a walking multiculturalist. So looking at the word culture, who of course humans have created and designed, it is a wish, it is a want, it is conscious that we want this bacterial community.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd say, "Ooh, that's garbage," or "That's bad," right? "Ooh, that mold is bad." But we have decided, no, these are good bacteria and yeasts that we want to continue for generations and create it part of our culture.
It's a culture because for humans, culture functions more at the speech level, language level, right? It's something we construct from the abstract that separates us from our natural origin. Sometimes our more our animal instinct or our biological evolutionary relation with plants and so. And in our Western culture, a lot of fermented foods, or usually they were associated with foreign cultures or not Western cultures or so. Um, but it is like not right now as a species, we are again trying to rediscover knowledge that we have for tens of thousands of years, because we actually need to find new ways, alternative ways at the official Western industrialized consumption process, because of matters of sustainability, because of matters of new diseases, because of of things we can not only handle with this, let's say, technocratic Western world we were living in, and we didn't know about microbial, in science, microbial processes for so long, even though we were using it, and
Yeah,
definitely has definitely an impact in our human culture, and it's a symptom also for a lot of um, things we forgot that we should be discovered, and
definitely. I think we have to remember or relearn a lot of these things. But even if we look in the store shelves now, even though it's all very industrialized, let's say, sort of around about 1/3 of all of our foods have gone through some kind of fermentation process already. So, for example, chocolate that has to be fermented. Those cocoa beans have to be fermented in order to get the chocolate that we know today. Coffee has to, those coffee berries, the
right.
cascara has to be fermented in order for us to get that really deep, acidic, fruity taste in the coffee bean. Otherwise, it's just some kind of seed. You can have green coffee, but of course, green coffee tastes very different than fermented coffee. Or we have mustard, ketchup, olives, wine, beer,
Green coffee
which
is like with green beans, or how does it work?
that one I'm not so sure. I know
Okay,
that I know that there's raw coffee beans where you
okay.
can like still get the
But the
caffeine out
beans
of
you
it.
can get from the supermarket, so to say.
Have gone through fermentation.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, so
it's
much of
not
our
just
foods.
roasted thing.
It's roasted after. I mean, it's
Okay,
not necessarily alive. It's not probiotic. But if we're
right.
looking at the products in the store shelves, they have gone through fermentation. Even chili sauce, right? Tabasco originally was fermented. Of course, the Industrial Revolution came along and said, well, we can just add straight up vinegar, which vinegar in its own on its own is a fermented product. But we can just add straight up vinegar and kill everything that's living in there and still get a sour result. However, yeah, fermented foods, living fermented foods is yet another story. And that's maybe the one that we want to get back to our roots and say, okay, we have vinegar pickles and we have salt pickles. So in German, where we are in Berlin here, we have Salzgurken, which are the real ones, and we have Essiggurken. And the Salzgurken, the salt pickles, are the real ones. And if you go to, say, Poland or places in Russia, or I think even Romania, they have a lot of these real pickles that still exist, are still part of the culture. And at some point in, say, my parents' generation was very uncool. It was very like, ooh, why are you doing that poor thing? Why are you preserving food?
Right.
You know, and then they wanted to buy everything because it's so much easier and looks better. And now comes the next generation who says, I want to do this again.
Right. So you discovered a whole world you were not aware of, even though you were into, in some ways, into chemistry or environmentalism, or you discover something that the whole world that also has a lot to do with history, with culture, with everyday life.
Totally. There's not one culture that doesn't have something fermented. And
Right.
that's why I was looking, okay, is there a culture that was super sterile and didn't ever ferment anything? I mean, if there is one, it might be the Western culture that we live in today that is so afraid of bacteria, yeast, mold,
Right.
that doesn't want to ferment anything. But if you look historically, every culture had something that they were fermenting.
And when you discovered this process in Mozambique, was it? Yeah. Um, what was the process for you to say, okay, this is such a new level of worldview for me. I want to go all the way. I told you I heard only half of the story of you traveling the world and finding this. I had no idea until this art talk. It was art talk festival. I was there actually looking more for art related things, and everything was so boring. And when I was going out, your talk was like in a fireside, outside, garden. I mean, it was really refreshing. How something so out of the box can bring like new arrangements and connections. What after Mozambique you?
Yeah, I was in Mozambique from late 18 till 20 years old. And from there, of course, I just wanted to travel the world and use my whole international development
Right.
degree. But I was in India, Vietnam, all of Southeast Asia, basically. And I started to collect bacteria and yeast from different cultures. So I was very good at bacterial smuggling. I have 2 blogs written about how to smuggle bacteria.
But because it's not legal,
I
or
mean, it's not legal because we have
right.
bacteria and yeast all over us all the time, right?
But it's not
Especially
protected like all antiquities are protected,
it
or
was I
like
was in a tricky situation in New Zealand, let's say, because they're
okay,
very strict.
they are
They're
regulated.
very
Okay.
regulated, and I was almost fined $4,000 New Zealand dollars and almost put in jail for having 8 different yogurt cultures in my bag, and I did have to throw those away, but I had a backup, and I got them to ship that to me when I was arriving in Germany. So I've been collecting bacteria and yeast and spores from around the world, and in order to bring that to other people and also bring the knowledge, so
Right.
traditional skills. As well as new fusion
But when did
ideas.
you learn? I mean, when did you? What was the phase that you learned to become this bacteria Indiana Jones and travel the world to get the?
I pick up skills from whoever is there. Who it's mainly definitely no Instagram stars. It's old ladies and men and people who have these cultures. So for example, Cornelius here is a 157-year-old sourdough.
Wow. That's the thing, because So this and is there animals or how do you what the
Microbes.
microbes, but they form this organism that so not microscopic organism that you can touch
Yeah.
and they live hundreds of years. So there's also this thing that you can grab a part of it, but it's still an extension of these hundreds of years
Yeah, someone has to take
individual.
care of it. And this is where humans and microbes are very much one and the same. Like they're very much together. They're very much it's a symbiosis. So someone had to take care of Cornelius for 157 years. I have been taking care of him for the last 7 years and
With no
and
human interaction, they don't
they wouldn't
survive.
survive. Not this microbial composition. He needs to be fed. And so Cornelius, I picked up on my microbial circus tour, I call it, in Iceland. And I was on the
Beatles
hunt.
reference.
It's called the Microbial Circus Tour. And I travel with all the circus show freaks or whatever with like,
Yeah,
the kombucha Scoby, her
right.
name's Snowflake, and Harry's the water kefir, and Cornelius and some of the other show
Yeah,
pieces
it's like an
here.
old school fair.
It's like a
Yeah,
flea
flea circus.
circus, but it's the microbial circus. And I was in Iceland looking for fermented shark because that's what they traditionally did in Iceland, haukar.
Right.
And I just followed my nose and found the fermented shark because it smells really crazy, very much like ammonia. And Iceland's quite small, so I was kind of followed by people who knew what I was doing. And this one old woman came to the farm where I was staying and said, "Hey, I have this sourdough, and it's my
A
mother's
shaman.
sourdough." And she said, "I have no children, and I'm old. And if nobody takes him, when I die, he will die. But I heard what you're doing. Would you adopt him?" And I said, "Oh, I don't do bread. I don't bake. I do everything else. I do sauerkraut, tempeh,
Yeah,
gojis, kombucha, everything else." And she said, "Listen, if you don't take him, he's gone."
it was very important.
And so I said, "Okay, I take the baby. I'll adopt him. I'll take the responsibility." And from that day on, I've been baking pretty much one loaf of bread every day for 7 years, and sometimes more because I have events or I'm sharing. And of course, my first loaf is the ugliest thing I've ever created. But from then, it's a journey, right? It's a
right.
symbiosis with your cultures, and you feed them, and they feed you, in a way.
So you just use a little bit of it every time to you. I know nothing about it about cooking bread.
I mean, all cultures are treated differently, and they
Okay.
all need different kinds of food. And it's like having different pets, right?
Right.
One is vegan, one needs milk,
Wow.
one has a different kind of
They have
sugar.
personalities.
They have personalities. I mean, of course, they have different names with edible alchemy, but of course, that's only one piece. They have completely different attitudes. Some like it colder, some like it warmer. And that's what I find really exciting is how they change also with the environments that they're in, and how you can they adapt just like humans. But of course, we have to sort of watch how they're
Right.
changing. If it's too hot, or if there's chlorine in the water, something might happen. And so it's in a way a responsibility to take care of so many pets.
Right. It's very interesting actually because, as you say, it's something that is so entangled with our human history. Without the human intervention, they will not keep on living. So it's definitely something we knew or we had integrated in our lives,
Yeah.
and we don't anymore. And when we talk about nowadays about how bread is bad for you, or a lot of things are bad for you, but in most of cases, what's bad for you is like the industrialized, bio,
Exactly. I
non-natural
mean,
version of
exactly.
it.
Looking at bread, I mean, we have an idea of what bread is because the industry has given us Wonder Bread. But if we're eating bread that's been prepared, say with sourdough, it's then fully digested, whereas industrial bread is only half digested and leaves us to do the rest of the digesting in us, which gives people indigestion, gives them bloating, and then everyone thinks, well, I must be gluten intolerant. And I'm like, no, it's
That's what I thought. That's why I started buying
gluten-free.
beer without gluten, and friends already told me no, that is not
It's
that is
probably,
not the
unless
way.
you have celiac, which is an allergy to these gluten proteins, you're probably not gluten
I
intolerant.
wanted to try something, like, um, but of course, has more to do with how healthy, how natural the process of making it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these fermented foods, I know it doesn't sound so sexy, it doesn't sound so attractive, but they are pre-digested. They're pre-broken down, something that our bodies, our guts doesn't have to do. And all of those nutrients that are, say, in a cabbage are available. They're broken, the leaves are broken down in a way where the vitamins and minerals are suddenly available to our microbiome, to our large intestine, and we can just absorb those, no problem. We don't have to break it down and transform things because they've been done and transformed in a glass beforehand.
Right.
So that makes it super highly bioavailable, which means easily to digest nutrients, and yeah, highly nutritious, basically.
And the sourdough is the one for fermented bread,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
In Argentina, in the quarantine times, in Buenos Aires at least, they all buy bread in the supermarket. But it got very popular very fast to have masa madre, so
Masa madre.
mother
Yeah.
dough.
Yeah.
How does that work? Does it have that in, or?
That's the same. I mean, masa madre
But
is.
it doesn't have this. They don't have this animal in a jar, and or how? I don't understand what
Yeah,
the.
I
I
mean,
thought masa madre
probably.
was just a dough, already prepared dough, and then you use a little bit of it.
Yeah, that's basically what you would do
Ah,
here. So you would feed this sourdough, and when I say feed, water and flour. That's his food, water and flour. And flour is a form of sugar, and yeast wants to eat sugar.
glucose.
Glucose is a type of sugar. So
Okay.
glucose, fructose,
Any type of
maltose.
sugar. Okay.
Yeah, and flour is a starch, which is like a complex carbohydrate, and can actually break down these complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, which it can eat. So yeast is always looking for sugar. Flour is a type of sugar, and you can use that sourdough to inoculate more flour, like your bread, basically, and make the bread rise. So it's basically a starter culture. You don't need packaged yeast, and in fact, packaged yeast that you get just this little cube or a little package is
Right.
one variety of yeast, whereas Cornelius is not only yeast but also bacteria and multiple types of bacteria.
That's why I could never manage to bake bread properly. I was using this cube thing.
It's faster, but you're going to notice in your microbiome that something was not complete. There was
Right.
missing bacteria to help digest all of the flour. And that's
Right.
when people feel like, oh, I'm so bloated because all this bubbling action should have happened beforehand, but
Right.
instead it's happening in you.
I was watching some YouTubes on the topic, and very famous bread makers from New York, for example, and so they are. He was telling about how this thing was alive, and you have to take care for it, and it should be happy, and you can feel it in how it reacts and how it.
Yeah, see, they're talking about it like a person,
Yeah.
and I think that's beautiful. I think some people think, oh, that's a bit crazy that you name your sourdough and then you sometimes have eyes that put eyes on the jar or whatever, It's
Yeah,
like it's really
I
like a
think
pet.
yeah, we had one of these kombucha jar
Yeah,
photos.
exactly. She's still there. She's in the lab. This is just a piece of her I have here.
Yeah,
The the mother SCOBY, and SCOBY. Do you know what that stands for? SCOBY.
I know it's what I would call the thing, so the animal, so the individual that all this bacteria culture makes.
Yeah.
But is it specific for kombucha?
No, actually, that's a good question because SCOBY stands for, it's an acronym, and it stands for symbiotic, so coming together, symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So bacteria and yeast came together and decided to form a type of cellulose, like plant. Plants are also made out of cellulose. And I can open this up here and,
Yes. Okay.
oh, you hear it? She popped, so she went, pff. because there's pressure building. She's eating some
Right.
sugar. And I'll just reach in here. She's
Yes.
quite sour. So I'm not even worried. I'm not even worried about getting my fingers
It's really alien,
in
I
there.
have to say.
This is just a piece of
Wow.
a lot of SCOBY. I mean,
Yeah.
Snowflake has, I call her Snowflake because she
Okay.
always grows a new one on top. And she has grown to 85 kilo in a tank before. So this is really just a small little piece
Wow.
of her.
85 kilo just
Yeah.
wow.
And so this, what I'm holding right now is
Yeah.
a combination of bacteria and yeast. And they came together and formed the cellulose. And
Right.
and often people think that it's just a kombucha that can do that.
Right.
But actually, there's many kinds of scobies in the world, and there's only a couple that are recognized. So beside Snowflake, I have Harry's, plural. So, because there's many of them. And Harry's are also scobies, but they don't grow in a big piece, but they grow in these beautiful crystals here.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, they really look
You
like...
can hold it a bit upper, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a completely different morphology.
Exactly. So they grow in these perfect little crystals and are quite
But there's
jelly.
still a culture, so to say.
Exactly. It's still a SCOBY, so it's a colony or a
Okay.
culture of bacteria and yeast. And then there's ones like called milk kefir, and they look like
Right.
cauliflower.
To make this yogurt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's many kinds of scobies,
Yeah.
and only some of them are recognized. And other ones that grow, people get scared of and they throw away in the garbage. So they're not then culture because people have decided, no, I don't want that. And other people have decided, yes, I do. So then sometimes things are labeled as culture, like blue cheese, for example. I mean, that's not a SCOBY, but that's to some cultures,
Right.
they say, yes, this is a good thing. And then in other cultures, they say, why would you eat that moldy milk? Right?
Yeah.
And and some of the Western cultures and other cultures, they'll look at, say, moldy soybeans. And why would you eat moldy soybeans? Are you crazy?
Right.
But it depends who decides what is culture and what is not.
Totally. That's also a neurocentristic a symptom of how far away we become with modernism, at least in the Western world, with a lot of knowledge that even before the Middle Ages, before feudalism, and before we're having so the church and the king, and where all access to information was restricted. Thousands of years before, there were a lot of cultures that, from the perspective of the Western world, the Roman Empire was in charge of expanding and categorizing and determining what was culture and what was not. Even here in Germany, what was at one time also there was many different cultures that evolved in the forest for thousands of years since we came out of Africa, and they have a really other understanding of chemistry and medicine and working with plants, like the Druids and so, right? And all this history was not written down. It was just adapted from the perspective that the Roman Empire could. And afterwards, with let's say French rationalism and encyclopedia and everything, Illuminism and so, right? So just everything that fit in our categories and everything else was left behind. We also left behind so much for thousands of years that were good for us, like at the biological evolutionary level. And now we are, at least from this part of the world, desperately trying to recover it or find this kind of knowledge, because we need it even for microdosing with mushrooms, because nothing else works, or understanding how to eat better, because we realize that
The industry has done
it's not
something.
working, like food industry is not working for us because we're always sick.
Yeah.
It's definitely a symptom of a new probably by necessity,
Yeah,
probably because we reach a limit when even someone that don't understand about it like me can realize what we have of the what we have offered is not doing it in matter of a whole well-being system, right?
definitely.
And I think that's why a lot of this new knowledge is coming up. Also, a lot of times it goes against consume industry and system because if you can grow things for yourself or cure not everything, but a lot of things
Yeah,
for
I think a
yourself,
lot
then
of
you wouldn't buy it, as
definitely.
a
I think a lot of
product.
edible
And
alchemy is anti-consumerist. I mean, it's
right,
a really bad business prospect, but
right,
because I give you a tool, say you get a sourdough culture and you can bake bread for life. You
right,
never need me again. You come to a workshop, you learn how to bake bread, see you never.
right.
And so, in terms of business, I'm a very bad businesswoman, but I think this is such valuable information that people need to know in
Right.
order to, get past, say, what the industry is selling us. And
Yeah. And in that way, capitalism works so bad that we are for, I would say, a century, at least in literature and science fiction, already thinking ways of how we will survive the end of capitalism, right? So
yeah,
we are already for a lot of decades speculating on which tools we need to recover to survive when the net collapse, like um, how it is called? Yeah, food production, net, and everything that keeps us connected and consuming. And it was not the reality for our species until like the very last 0, point something percent of the time. Most of the time, we were living differently.
yeah,
And I think that's very is something we should address if we want to survive or go forward after this situation, and that definitely involves recovering ancient knowledge, things that have to do with our evolution, things that from the modern perspective is gross or just rotten or and actually it might have been why we are as we are as a species right now, right? How we
definitely.
evolution with all these other species in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at technology, I mean, these are ancient techniques, right? Kombucha has
Right,
theoretically been around for 2,000 years.
right,
Cornelius himself, or this sourdough culture, at least 157 years, but sourdough has been done ancient of days. But the power of now is that we have technology to be able to analyze and see what is actually going on and why is it important. Because before we're like, oh, we squish some grapes in a bucket and then at some point we drink it and we feel really nice, and we decided to call that wine rather than grape juice. And if we leave it a bit longer, then we get this other thing that's really sour and we don't want to drink a lot of, but we can use it for other projects, called vinegar, right? And but now we know so much more. And now we have also science and technology backing us up, where we can discover, what do these cultures actually do besides like taste good or make us feel good? What are they actually doing in us? And this is where I see great development happening, and also support of these ancient traditional techniques that are coming back and supporting and saying, oh, what grandma was doing or great grandma was doing made a lot of sense because ABC, because
yeah,
technology shows that her milk kefir was actually able to help our gut microbiomes.
right,
But I mean, that's still a long way to go. We've only focused on the gut microbiome
yeah,
in terms of technology properly for the past 5 years,
yeah.
but
It's nothing.
it's really
When you
nothing.
think about it, we as a Western citizens, modern citizens, we know so little for what life was for human species, the last hundreds of thousands of years. And that's sometimes when you think about it, it's a bit it's not so cool
Yeah.
because it's obvious like we will need to have this knowledge at some point. We cannot expect that everything goes smoothly as it goes. It's already not going smoothly, but um, and especially when differentiating yourself as a species from the natural world, I think is not making it anymore in our human society because of new diseases we invented. We knew also psychological
Yeah.
and psychosomatic, and because of separating us too much from something that is in our DNA. Actually, you
Yeah.
can
Or
trade.
separating ourselves from bacteria. I mean, for such a long time, the word bacteria or the word yeast was very scary to many people. And looking at it, actually, 97% of bacteria that we know as humankind is good for us, or we don't even know if it does anything good. It's benign, but it's not harmful. So that leaves like 1 to 3% of bacteria that we know as humankind that would be potentially bad for us. But we have this overarching look at bacteria and say, oh, bacteria is bad. But
Right,
actually, it's so important.
right.
And we're only discovering now that we actually need bacteria to survive. And the more we separate ourselves from bacteria, the more, say, hand sanitizer we use, the more antibiotics we use, the worse off we're going to be.
Right. We learn how to kill every microscopic,
Congratulations. Yeah.
but that's in the end. This we are also formed by microscopic
Yeah,
individuals. So if we kill any, we will also kill ourselves. That's
definitely.
the and actually there's a theory that this evolutionary the jump, this mutation of stop being allergic to fermented fruits, to
Hmm.
this typical starter bacteria that comes from, was probably one of the main conditions that we evolution as a human species today. With the story of the first ape ancestor from humankind, so hominin that could eat the fruits that were left in the ground, even though they were fermented. And because they were fermented, like bad bacteria couldn't come in and he could process it. And this was apparently one of the huge jumps in evolution. So, probably one of the reasons why we are here and we still have
Definitely.
problems to deal with it in a way.
Definitely. Why that's the big question is why do we want to get rid of something that's so integral to our being human being? And I think a large part of it is time, right? Like we want to become so efficient and so fast that we're constantly looking for a very fast way forward, a fast solution, a cure-all solution. However, fermentation takes time. I mean, there are some ferments that go very quickly. I mean, if you're in the right temperatures, you can make a yogurt in like 5 to 8 hours. But a good wine, come on, it's going to take some years. Or sourdough bread is going to take at least a good 24, 36 hours. And the industry can't handle this slow unpredictability.
Right,
And but if we can grasp that again and understand and sort of enjoy that process, then I think we're going
right,
to be a lot better off. But the big question is how do we get there?
right. Also, because we've been the last, I would say, 2,000 years or so, I related a lot with the history of imperialism for the Western world. We went censoring, canceling, and dissolving all traces of what traditionally, supposedly more primitive cultures that were being conquered um, happened with the in Europe, with Europe countries in relation to the Roman Empire, but also happened to the whole American country where I come from. Um, Half a millennia later, when Europeans had managed to rule the world, censor all knowledge that didn't have to do with the official knowledge, but also had managed to have the most extended plagues and have no solution or knowledge how to solve it. And this is how they discovered American continent, and they managed to kill almost instantaneously most of the population because of this ignorance, and the stories of how the Aborigines were helping the conquistadors that were living next to the water in very non-hygienic conditions and had no knowledge on how to preserve or how to find
Yeah.
food, or and from North America to Argentina to South America, my country, there's stories, very symptomatic stories on how during the centuries actually the colonization could happen, because at first, even though not knowing they kill most of the population because of this plague, the colonization, the conquest could happen also because the Aborigines were helping the Europeans to survive, giving them food, teaching them how to, and still they destroyed these traces on how to find this knowledge these supposedly more primitive civilizations had because of course, imperialism,
Yeah.
that we lost so much in the way. And sometimes we are a bit like these conquistadors, that know only how to buy in the supermarket, but if we are left on our own for one day, we don't know what to do. And this is a bit the quest right now. It's kind of like reinterpreting, writing history. We have to
Definitely.
go.
Definitely. I think people are intrigued now more than ever. I mean, I've been doing edible alchemy for 11 years now, and when I started, people thought I was crazy. What are you doing playing with bacteria and yeast? Are you sure you want to focus in that area? And I just kept at it because I really believed there was potential, and thank technology and innovation that it has supported what I'm doing, and science basically. But people are now more interested than ever because of all of the antibiotics and because of
Because
the
we are sick,
industry.
basically.
Because people are sick, it comes to the direct pain
Yeah.
point and saying, "Hey, I'm not doing well in my gut microbiome. I tried all these medicines. I tried all of these other pills and powders. Nothing is working. Maybe it has something to do with what I'm eating." And so the job of edible alchemy is to, demystify bacteria, yeast, spores, right, molds,
Right.
and educate people on how to get their hands back on what their ancestors were doing, right?
Right.
Like, how do you bake sourdough bread yourself? How do you find a rhythm in your day? How do you brew your own kombucha? How do you make your own sauerkraut? What's the difference between your own homemade sauerkraut and the stuff that you buy in the store, right? There is a difference, unfortunately, right? Labels
Yeah.
don't say the full truth,
No.
and
Still watching the labels, you can still tell it's bad, but
right.
they
I
are still
mean,
not
a lot of
telling the
people
whole.
don't know that sauerkraut in the store shelves, even in like an organic shop, is like, I would say 99% of the time it's pasteurized. Slowly, there's companies coming out with living sauerkraut that's not been pasteurized, but most of it is pasteurized, where all of the good bacteria that you want to do their job have been killed off. And people are just living with this idea that sauerkraut or sauerkraut juice, like pickle juice, is really good for hangovers and this and that. And sometimes I feel like stopping people in the line and saying, "Excuse me, you're just buying sour, salty vegetable water. It's not going to do the same thing as if you had real pickle juice.
It's not helping with your hangover.
It's not
You
really
need
good.
real
You
bacteria.
need the real stuff. I mean, maybe the electrolytes are helping, but the bacteria are definitely
Right.
not there. So, yeah, I'm through my work is basically to educate, demystify, make people excited about things that often they felt like are not graspable, right? To understand, what are bacteria, what are yeast, how do they work, how can I as a person interact with like in a symbiotic relationship with these things on a daily basis, and not become like a chore. I definitely suggest before people have children or dogs, they should adopt a kombucha SCOBY because it's really easy. It doesn't talk
Did
back.
you show the kombucha SCOBY already?
I did, yeah.
Okay. They look very alien, and I think it has to do with our also modern world and how we systematize everything that we consume that should be non-living,
Yeah.
like perfectly controlled, also at the microscopic level, pasteurized and everything, because of course it helped us get to where we are as a modern society, encyclopedia society and science society, killing those microorganisms. But it also seems so dumb when we just know how to kill microorganisms and don't know how to help the microorganisms that are helping us.
Totally.
And this is the point we are at right now. I don't know which are the relationships between fungi and this kind of bacteria cultures. But for example, we have the example of what is this antibacterial mushroom? Psilocybin,
Not
no,
psilocybin.
yeah, that's something different.
The antimicrobial one is Schmetterlingstrometer.
This was discovered in the
Butterfly.
First World War to
Oh,
treat
the penicillin.
penicillin, genau.
Yeah.
And of course, this is some fermentation process also use. I think I don't know
Spores. Yeah,
how.
well, like yeast and mold is kind of under the same kind of heading. But of course, you have spore cultures, which, like, for example, koji, which is a spore Aspergillus oryzae, or you have tempeh, which is a rhizopus spore. Those spores are able to feed on and digest carbohydrates and proteins and create things that are extremely nutritious and also delicious. So, for example, like tempeh is just, say, beans. I wouldn't even say just soybeans because I do it with kidney beans and black beans and lentils and all sorts of different protein-rich foods, protein-rich lentils and tempeh. So this spore goes on the beans and starts to digest them and creates a very, like, again, bioavailable, where the nutrients are able to be
This is a
digested.
fermentation process where fungi
Yeah.
actually has to do with it. Even though penicillin, for example, this is fungi that kills bacteria.
Yeah, it's exactly. So there's some. I mean, that would be a fungi that, say, kills bacteria, and then you have a fungi that is, say, going on. It's culturing
Right.
basically the proteins, and in that case, there's not necessarily bacteria involved, but rather just the spores. And when you have protein, like a pure protein, say, I don't know, a chicken breast, like raw chicken breast, if you put that on your tongue, which you shouldn't because it's a raw chicken breast,
Salmonella.
exactly, it'll taste like nothing. Or like egg white, right? Like pure, almost pure protein tastes like nothing. However, when that protein is broken down, either by fermentation or by heat, you taste something. So again, the chicken breast, you fry that chicken breast, suddenly you taste something. You don't even need salt, it'll taste different because the protein has been broken down into amino acids, and suddenly you have this umami thing.
This is the umami flavor, right?
That's umami. And you can get that through fermentation, which means you don't have to cook anything. So a chicken breast you cook, but you could also potentially, you could also like ferment it, or you could ferment beans. Like beans are quite high in protein. You ferment them and you make miso or you make tempeh. And you can make all sorts of amazing fermented bean products which taste meaty, although they're not cooked and although they're not meat. They're completely vegan, and in fact, they're raw.
And that we have the taste for it. Evolutionary is, I heard, is one of the only ways for anthropologists right now to find, because the things are not preserved in fossils or so, to find out really what our diet was regarding to beans. I heard in the original state they were poisonous for us.
They
so
are.
the
They
only
are.
way we could eat them was through this fermentation process, and
Yeah.
that we have these neuroreceptors for our taste, for this kind of taste is a symptom that actually we were just eating them after they were processed by the bacteria, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
I
But
mean,
potatoes is another example.
tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's actually a lot of food that would be to us poisonous before fermentation or before cooking. And the word fermentation comes from the Latin fevere. Fevere meant in Latin to boil. And so if you think about it, someone must have saw, I don't know, a container of, say, fruit that started to bubble. And they said, hey, it's boiling. Because that's what happens when we put water on the fire, it boils. And so the word fermentation, although there's no heat involved, they connected it to boiling because there was bubbles.
Right.
And so in a way, what's actually happening is a type of cooking, even though there's no heat applied in most cases. Not all cases. Of course, there's exceptions. There's always exceptions in fermentation. But yeah, it's quite interesting to make the connection that,
Yeah.
say, even this fermented shark that I had in Iceland, raw, it would kill you. It's so high in ammonia that if you ate it raw, which they did because they were hungry and they're like, oh, I got this giant fish, let's try it, died. Then they tried some other methods, tried cooking it, I don't know, didn't work. Then they discovered if I bury it in the ground for 6 months and then hang it and then try it, I won't die. And I got superpowers. No, but almost. I mean,
But it
it's
was
really
an
healthy.
evolutionary superpower. I mean, in the times after the Ice Age, and so how this Homo sapiens and so were transiting this world, and the things they cannot prove because of fossils or so, but through experimental anthropology, they can more or less prove. Were processes that were totally able to do even without a lot of effort or without just waiting, for example. Like there was an anthropologist that proved it just sinking a dead horse in winter in a lake, and then in spring it will, like, I think, naturally come out and it was ready to consume. Of course, the state of it was texture and so special, but it's totally safe for humans to eat. And this could have been a perfect way, natural way to have season to season this access to meat. And otherwise, they couldn't prove how we didn't get a lot of diseases we should have gotten if we should have eaten that raw, for example. So a lot of this new revisionist anthropology regarding alimentation and so eating and so go a lot of into these practices that for normal modern world they are obscure because for a long time we couldn't explain what happened.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And because of this prejudice, we just let them out. And we're realm of magic or alchemy, like your company.
Exactly. Yeah, and in fact, fermentation, it has had a really bad name for, say, before when I started this company. Fermentation was like, ooh, not nice. It means rot, or it means like bad.
Visual communications.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, it's the safest form of food preservation. It's the safest form. So it's safer
Right.
than cooking, like jam
You
making.
need a fridge with consuming electricity, for example.
Exactly. It's safer than salting. It's safer than sugaring, smoking, drying, freezing, because all these other preservation techniques allow for bad bacteria to come, and fermentation doesn't. I mean, of course, there's
Right.
exceptions to that. If you're doing meat, then you have to be a bit more careful, but it's so
Right.
safe because as the fermentation process is happening, there's a souring happening. So when yeast eats sugars, it's creating carbon dioxide, it's creating acid, it's creating alcohol, but it's also creating this, sourer product. So the pH is going lower, 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 and at 4.6, no bad bacteria can live there.
That's the
It's super
trick.
safe.
That's why a lot say that the moment we develop, or our ancestors, hominin ancestors, developed this mutation to not be allergic to this first started microbiome that generated this alcohol, but then stabilized it, and then no other cultures from microbes would get in because of the alcohol or something like that, was one of the biggest evolutionary
Discoveries.
reasons why we are here as a species, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, looking back also with the beer saved people's lives because the water was polluted. And then when they fermented that same water, it
We like to say
sterilized
that in
everything.
Germany a lot.
And
Like in the
Belgium.
Middle
Yeah.
Ages, we were just drinking beer.
Yeah, I mean,
It
it
was
was
water
safer.
for us.
It was safer, in fact. I mean, people were getting, say, cholera or I don't know what else, what other diseases were going in the water. But as soon as it was fermented, it was sterile. It was safe. Only the good bacteria could live there and not the bad. And fermentation saved so many lives over the years, also from like vitamin C deficiency, like over winter when you have no vegetables. I'm coming from Canada. We have winter for like at least 6 months. There's
Wow,
no
right.
vegetables. Like there's nothing growing. But if you had fermented something, I mean, now of course we can buy anything, but back in the day, if you had fermented your cabbage, you have sauerkraut, you have vitamin C, you have vitamin B1, B2, niacin, riboflavin, all these things are there in the dead of winter. And otherwise, you wouldn't have anything.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have flesh-eating disease.
Right.
So I'm sure this happened probably to a lot of people, but they discovered with time, necessity, starvation, accident,
Yeah.
that fermentation is a great thing. Like who decided to eat that glass of moldy beans and say this is delicious?
Exactly.
Somebody did. You know, he was
Yeah.
probably really hungry and maybe even poor. And because of his discovery, I like to think they became super rich and probably some kind of bodybuilder because they were eating
Yeah.
these protein-rich moldy beans.
Yeah, I mean, each time I think it was a superpower we acquire when we learn how to coexist and do something more out of these relationships with plants, other realms, uh, plants and microbial, and so. And it's a shame that in our modern world, as you said, is like almost a class thing,
Yeah.
like don't get your hands dirty into that because they will think you're poor.
Yeah.
And
Slowly it's coming back though. I think this next generation, I'm
we're all
also
getting poor.
we're all getting poor and we're all getting, I think a lot of people are getting more interested in herbs. I'm a herbalist, so I offer foraging walks, and
Right.
I'm so surprised how many people
You're
are
a
interested.
Kräuterpädagoge,
I'm a Kräuterpädagoge,
which in English
exactly.
means herbs,
A herbal
herb
educator.
educator. Yeah.
Yeah. German has very specific words
Yeah.
for specific titles. And yeah, I mean, I educate people on edible herbs. That's my specialty, is edible and medicinal herbs. But I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe anything. But there is like this holistic approach of going out and finding things that you can eat that have very high flavor. It's like a lot more than that Eisbergsalat, that iceberg salad, which has been bred to have no taste and no nutrients. Then you grab something from the forest that has a lot of taste and a lot of nutrients. So you
Right.
don't need a lot. And it's so intriguing to see what's all out there. It's not just green. It's medicine. It's tea. It's food. It's your salad. It's all out there, even in the cities.
And it's so difficult for us actually to, as civilized human beings, even though we can talk about how little we represent from the history of our species, how our society is has nothing to do with what we are evolutionary wise or biologic wise. It's still very difficult for us to open up,
Totally.
and really, yeah, let's just eat, from the park like a plant or
I mean, that's why
something.
I'm there. I'm like, try this leaf and try this leaf. But yeah, I think there is definitely a fear, and I notice it, and I notice also the people are just feeling safe to buy things in the supermarket, which are wrapped in a lot of plastic and this and that. And I'm thinking, well, I mean, you have a leaf on a tree that you think, isn't that dirty? Couldn't, I don't know, a bird have shat on it or whatever? But then you have this stuff that's been wrapped in plastic for who
Yeah.
knows how long, and think of what's on that.
We have plasticosis now. It's a new disease they found in animals and so because so many accumulations of microplastics.
Oh no.
So, yeah,
Oh no.
that's that. And but we're still too afraid to get close to these microbial companions that actually been following us, our evolution for millions of years, actually.
Yeah.
Um, if you take from our hominin ancestors and so on, how our body actually evolved to these interactions. That's why it's mostly a communicational thing. That's why it's important what you are doing, trying from your edutainment project, trying to disarm, deconstruct the ways we think about it. I think that is very important because in potential post-apocalyptic world, if everything we talk all the time that everything will collapse. So when everything actually collapse or parts of it collapse, then we should lose at least these prejudgments because they will be important for our survival.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, if we don't have internet and we can't order our food to our houses and we can't get food at all, then what do we do, right? And there's actually a lot of food, even in the city,
Right.
growing around us, and outside of the city as well. And I think the people who know best about this are the people who experienced after World War II,
Right.
and who had to go and collect beech nuts and nettle and roots, and there wasn't much around, but they learned that there was.
In Germany, that's something very close still because of the grandmothers of
Yes,
a lot of friends you might have, and they really have a changed worldview, Weltanschauung in German. And that comes after apocalyptic event, when all the system, like modern system collapse, and you have again to recover the wisdom on how to get along with your surroundings, which sounds a bit stupid, but we are dissociated from that.
totally. Totally. I mean, yeah, people walk through the park and just see green. And I would
Right.
like them to see more, right? And
Salad,
yes, salad and medicine and all
pets,
sorts of things. Yeah. And the more you know,
culture.
the more you know, the more you see. And this is where I think edutaining people, as you said correctly, like educational entertainment
Yeah.
is where people learn the best, and not just be lectured at and like this is this and that is that, but have fun with things. I mean, name your bacterial cultures,
Right.
have fun with, have an interaction with them a little bit. It doesn't have to get perverted or anything.
Yeah.
It can just be a symbiosis, and have like a relationship literally with bacteria, yeast, with plants, with your environment around you. That's the holistic approach to understand your environment and live in it. Let it live in you.
Right. It's definitely skills we have to adopt, and it's so obvious that this is becoming a trend for the last years. Also, a lot of alternative, holistic or alternative, so let's say, eating ethics, consumption eating ethics, or medical healing practices, and it's not does not have to do with the fact that it's fashion, but it's a symptom of disease that this system is bringing upon us.
Yeah,
This amnesia we have in regarding our biological history and as a species, and so leaving so many things aside because they don't fit our like modern encyclopedia is not making it up is not making it for us at the everyday level, in our
Yeah.
mental health, in our minimal level. We need to feel good.
Yeah.
Actually, that's why this. I think a lot of people is looking more and more into the for psychological health and to alternative therapies also, and of course. We live in a culture where a lot of the food that is traditionally eaten as normal food, most of cases is not food
Yeah.
from a nutritional point of view,
Yeah.
because in the process so much has been taken out of, and we don't think about it because it's industrialized. It has the shape of a hamburger, so it's a hamburger, so we eat the hamburger. But our body thinks differently,
Yeah,
and then
exactly. The matrix. What's the matrix of the food, right?
right,
The overall composition. Like
right,
we're popping, say, vitamin C pills, but actually your body would be much better off eating an apple
exactly.
because there's vitamin C in there, which also combines with, say, the calcium in there, which combines with the fibers that are in there. It's the whole matrix. It's a whole food that has a very specific function to your body. And these like pills and powders, which are
Right.
isolated, don't do it their full function without the other components.
But for how many decades, scientists, doctors, and upon studies and research, were also prescribing just the vitamins,
Yeah, it's a great
and
industry. It's a great industry. Don't get me
it's easy to
started.
say. It would be I think it's also post-war cosmonaut thing, to have everything on a capsule,
Yeah,
and
it's super convenient. It's there. I mean, I don't think that they don't work, but I also don't think that they work better than real food.
but they are based on the premise that we as individuum, we are not made out of microorganism cultures that also need to live, and it's based upon something that is a force in a way, because when you understand that to process a vitamin, you need other elements in your body to process it, and
Yeah.
just with the vitamin won't do it. Probably will make an unbalance in the whole system, and even if you keep consuming vitamins, you won't get healthy. Then you start thinking of it otherwise, maybe a bit more organic, a bit more dialectical, in how we are also part of those things.
Sure. I mean, also now where science is pouring a lot of money is the whole gut brain connection, and
Right.
the big nerve, like the main nerve of our body that connects our gut to our brain and so many other parts of our body, that shows this old saying of "you are what you eat" is so very true.
Not a
Right?
Western saying, I guess.
What's that?
Not a Western
Not yeah.
culture saying, probably comes from the East.
Yeah, I mean, they say in German, "Du bist, was du isst," right? I think
Yeah.
they have it almost in all sorts of languages. You are what you eat, and as soon as you put something in your body, there's neurotransmitters and chemicals that are produced and then sent to your brain, like our most famous serotonin and
Right.
dopamine, right? Serotonin is our happy drug, and we all think it's happening in our head and produced here, but 90% is produced in the microbiome. And
Right.
so if you have a healthy microbiome and you're eating good things, then you're going to be feeling good. You're going to have a good mood. You're going to be
Yeah.
thinking straight. And that's where we keep forgetting. We think, well, no, it's just my brain. It's like, well, there's also something else that's going
I
on.
just need this one vitamin in a pill and it will fix it.
Right? I mean, and some vitamins and pills do their job for a short term, and like you said, probably have some side
Yeah.
effects that you're maybe missing something else, or you're depleted with this other thing. Or I mean, I don't want to harp too much on vitamins. I personally don't take any. That's just my
Right.
personal
Yeah.
life mantra is I'm pretty sure I can get everything from the food and drink that I have around me.
I mean, we live 99.9% of our species without industrialized vitamin. So,
Right. And so I'm thinking, like, how did my Oma do it? You know,
right.
my grandma who she was also in Germany and escaped the Second World War, and I'm pretty sure she didn't have time to go to the apothecary and get some
They
fancy
have very
vitamins.
few things available, and they
Exactly.
still made
She was
it.
on the run, you know. It's like, okay, what do we have? Like, what, you know, what's around? And she's 95 and still living. So
And where do you think there's a hope now that we, after we think everything can collapse and that we should learn how to survive in the park and so, and more seriously that we are looking for alternative ways for making sustainable urban environments regarding housing, food consumption and production. And do you see a future where we replace production systems for these new acquire old practices in relations to our relation to microorganisms? To the last years, also research on fungi exploded because
yeah,
we suddenly went out of our amnesia from
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of years, and we discovered yeah, all these neuroreceptors, all these things we have in our human DNA that were related to these microorganisms are actually relating to us. So we should do something about it. But also in industrial design, I don't know, there's so many potential areas into which this could be one of the, if we can make a system change that would make something more sustainable, or you think about it and the role it could have, or how do you picture it?
yeah. I think there are big steps being made towards understanding what the human body needs for health. I really hope, my deepest hope is that it isn't just for profit. I mean, of course that's a side effect, but I hope it's not the main goal that industries go in just to make profit. But I do see the potential of science being able to understand the microbiome, being able to understand bacteria in the gut better, that they can cater to particular, say, diseases or psychosomatic issues. I mean, there's research now going into, say, autism, even schizophrenia, figuring out, oh, there's maybe these particular minerals missing, or even bacteria, that if this person had this, then certain behavioral issues might be fixed. And this is my hope, that we get more understanding and can help people by resetting the gut microbiome, or even more common issues like IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, or SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or
Right.
leaky gut. And so many people, used to be 2 in 10 people were suffering with a gut issue, and now it's like one in two.
Right.
And my hope is that people can solve these issues, because like that's you're suffering every day if you have
And
a
that's
gut
not
issue.
because there's too much bacteria in your gut, it's because too
Probably
few,
too little.
too
Or
little. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know exactly, and always, but it's also that the way people are eating might be disturbing their gut in a way that it's not healing. Like a leaky gut is basically, there's a tear perhaps in your gut lining, and bacteria, which are good in your gut but not good in your bloodstream, are leaking out. And people are still trying to figure out how to solve that. But I think technology will be able to analyze this, and perhaps even accept crazy things like fecal transplants. I mean, that's like yet a whole nother
I hear
conversation.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's super taboo, but it's probably the most efficient way to change someone's gut microbiome. I mean, for the better. However, of course, there's all sorts of issues in the way of getting there. But I see that being a smart way to go forward, rather than too many medicinal interventions and this
Yeah,
and that.
but it's so
It's so
anti-intuitive, right, for our modern culture.
yeah.
And that would explain why we are getting sick, even though we try everything. Because obviously we are not trying everything. We are just trying everything in our comfort zone for our
It
modern,
needs to look nice. It needs to
civilized,
be in like a,
hygienic.
it needs to, exactly. It needs to be in a nice packaging with little capsules, and it needs to look really
Right.
pretty. And rather than have, it goes in our mouth, but actually a fecal transplant happens the other way around, and
Yeah.
that's super taboo. Like people don't want to talk about that, but it's the most efficient way. And up until this point, modern medicine isn't making it very acceptable or accessible because they see, I don't know, potential dangers around it. I personally think it's too cheap, it's too easy, and that's why they're not doing
Right.
it.
And it's common to say that children should eat earth like
Yeah,
as soon as they can, so they, and that's not also, if you think about this hygienic, ascetic, modern society that supposedly kills all bacteria. um, and this was not, it's not making it for us. Like killing all bacteria with can or microorganisms with can is not making us healthier. So we better try to get in contact with our ancestors, um, that were drinking fermented beverages and beer all the time,
yeah. I mean, or just
and
just
eating dirt.
being okay to touch things. I mean, yeah, touch dirt. It has a lot of microorganisms in it. Without them, we don't get food that we need to eat as well.
Because for a lot of time was antibiotics was, for 100 something years, antibiotics was the symbol of our advance in technology and health, and now for some years it's like, oh no, actually we need probiotics because our whole system is, we need to restore what we killed, so
Totally. I mean, antibiotics, I'm very thankful for antibiotics. I think a lot of people have antibiotics at least once or at least not 10 times in their life. And antibiotics has saved many lives.
for
There's
sure.
no doubt.
Yeah.
However, it's been overused, right? Like I'm coming from North America. It's like, oh, you have an eye infection, antibiotics. You have an ear infection, antibiotics. Your tummy hurts, antibiotics. And so they're just handing out antibiotics like candy, realizing only now that they've stripped people's microbiomes of all bacteria, the good and the bad,
Right.
and potentially harm them for the future. And they get more allergies and they're more susceptible to more illnesses, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to reevaluate how often do we use antibiotics. They're not the devil. Antibiotics are not the devil, but they shouldn't be used as often as
Right.
they have been.
But I don't normally get sick, for example, and I remember a couple of times I really got sick a couple of months after having something for which I should have taken. I had to take antibiotics.
Yeah.
And then after a lot of months not knowing what was happening, they realized, because you took, because we prescribed antibiotic for this that you were almost cured from, and now you're having these many months of imbalance
Yeah.
things, and this when they prescribe probiotics,
Yeah.
it was like a month and something process where I was really sick in a way that I've never been before.
Yeah, because you
And it,
wiped out your microbiome and you have to build that back. And if you don't, then the harmful bacteria will continue to take over. Yeah.
And do you think that it's possible to, let's say, adapt massively quick this, to surpass these preconceptions and to adapt these new forgotten techniques in our day-to-day life to make our life healthier in the short term? Or how do you see this on the macro level?
Yeah, I mean, eating fermented foods or drinking fermented beverages is a lifestyle. So it's not like, oh, I had kombucha today and I'm set for life.
Right.
Right? It's a lifestyle. It's as well as if you're eating, I don't know, fast food every day, it's also going to have an impact on your life. If you have it once, not so much. Right? Maybe you feel like, oh, I ate a lot of fries and hamburgers from whatever, some fast food restaurant, and I don't feel so good, but tomorrow I'll eat better again. Same thing goes with probiotics. If you have like a glass of kombucha, maybe you're like, wow, that felt good. You have to make it a lifestyle. And that's sort of what I want to show people in edible alchemy, is how to incorporate these things on a daily basis, where it's not a chore, it's not difficult. And even though fermentation takes time, it's like a one-time activity, and then you have it for a long time. Like if you make a big jar of kimchi, you make it once, takes you half an hour, let it ferment for 2 weeks. Okay, you don't have to really do anything. But then after that, you have a whole liter of kimchi that will last 2 years.
Very important in Japanese culture, no? Kimchi?
Korean mainly, but
Korean.
of course Japan has a lot of fermented tsukimono, a lot of different kinds of pickles, and
Right.
yeah.
I share in my family chat, so my mother and my older brothers, about today, and my mother cooks a lot, and my brother was like, let's all ferment. And my mother is like, I heard it's too difficult to do.
It's actually so easy. It's people think that also when they come to a workshop. They say, "Oh, I heard it's really difficult and something can happen after the workshop." They say, "I didn't realize it was so simple."
My brother says he incorporated making almond milk. So the process of making it took his day-to-day life. So I guess there's hope for all
Totally,
of us.
totally.
And what's where are your next steps? Your next objective as a bacteria communicator? And with edible alchemy, mother kombucha, all your projects, where do you see yourself and your projects going in the next times?
Yeah, it's I have my fingers in like all sorts of pies right now. So I'm doing workshops and educating. I'm say selling and sharing these stories as well as the bacterial cultures.
Right.
And I'm a student forever. So I'm
Same.
I am wanting to continue learning. I mean, I'm a herbalist now. I want to become a field mycologist. I'm hoping
Ah,
this
nice.
spring that I can take a butterfly course and like understand more about butterflies and insects. So like my personal goal is that I'm gonna continue learning forever and understanding this earth forever, because the more I understand about the earth, and when I go out into nature, the more I see, and that makes me so excited. And with edible alchemy, so many directions. Of course, I would be thrilled to see more living products on the store shelves, because I understand not everybody can make sauerkraut or kimchi. I would love that if people could, but not everyone's doing it as a full-time job. But if they could find real kimchi in a basic store shelf, or like real kombucha in the basic store shelves, which is starting to happen now, then that's already like a big hurdle, that people have this accessibility of
Right.
real foods.
I heard that one of the ways you started it because you were doing it by yourself, and suddenly so many people were asking for it because they needed it and it was impossible to get.
Yeah.
And that's how you started to escalating, so to say.
Yeah, I'm like the bacteria dealer now.
And what would you say to someone that is getting into this right now but doesn't know a lot? What are your
Follow your senses. Follow your senses. Like, a lot of people are afraid of failure. One thing is bubbles. When it's like bubbling is always a good sign. It's a sign of success, not a sign of failure.
right,
And
like champagne, for example?
yeah, exactly. Bubbles are showing that it's alive. Bubbles are showing that there is a fermentation process happening, a souring process that's happening, an alcoholic process that's happening.
Right.
It's a good thing. It's a safe thing, unless it explodes, of course.
Okay.
Um, but also follow
Like
your
always.
senses. Like if you look at something and there's spots of like blue green mold, you probably know it's not good. If you look at something, I mean, of course it's hard because you look at this kombucha SCOBY and it looks really scary, and you probably wouldn't want to eat that either. But smell it. Does it smell evil? Like sometimes there's an evil smell, right? You smell
Right.
something, you're like, ugh, like that's like
Like definitely not.
definitely not. If it, follow your nose. We have to
Yeah.
reconnect with our senses. We reconnect with our nose, with our eyes, with our ears as well, because you hear those bubbles sometimes, or when you open the jar, right? It pops. Reconnect with our senses, and then we can also try it out on our tongue. But I think a lot of people are too afraid, even when things are totally
Right.
fine.
I was living alone when I was too young, and asking my mother stupid things and regarding milk, and so he once told me, just smell it and search your feelings like a Jedi. But actually, there's a truth to it in our evolutionary things we evolved to have taste for, and are things we can really process at this stage, and things that give us non-linguistic, so
Yeah.
alert message or
Yeah.
not. Maybe we need to re-educate ourselves to
Definitely.
identify it.
Definitely. I mean, we're such a visual culture. We look on Instagram and we say, that salad looks delicious. You know, and
And that's enough.
and that's enough. I mean, it looks, I'm like, but you know, what is it actually? Is it delicious?
Plastic.
Is it good? Is it plastic? I mean, I was in Italy once and there was a salad there and I said the same thing. That looks delicious. And my Italian friend went over and just used his nose and he smelled it. He said, I'm not eating that. I said, what's going on?
Right.
He said, the oil is rancid. The oil is rancid. The oil is not good. I'm not eating that.
Right.
And I had no idea because I was only looking, and I would have
Maybe only
eaten
an
it.
Italian could identify.
Exactly. And I said, I want a nose like that. So I'm going to
Right.
start to, you know, use my senses, train my senses, reconnect with my senses to understand when oil is good and when oil is bad. It is a smell. It is something you can smell.
But you could say that also at a microbial, microscopic level, we can also feel, even though even if it's not from our modern language, we can feel without our ancient senses.
Totally. I can smell
what's
a
going on.
good sauerkraut and a fart, no problem. between a sauerkraut. Like you open a jar of kimchi and it stinks, you know, and I'm like, that smells amazing. And other people might say, ugh, what is that? So
It's definitely evolutionary superpowers we need to reconnect to. Reconnect to our feelings.
definitely, it's not impossible.
Thank you, Alexis,
Thank you so
for
much.
being here tonight. We will leave the links for your projects in the description of the video and in other platforms where we can also, and for your workshops and online courses and everything you do. And we see us in the future.
Great.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much.
High five. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give us a like and a comment under the video. If you want to see more, click here and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.